Oakes, who is editor of The Media Leader. We write about advertising primarily from the media side of things. So it's really good to have this opportunity to talk to you. How's it going? I mean, why did you want the job of Kantar Media CEO, and why do they want you?
Gosh, I was fearing that question. So first, I'm delighted to be here and see such a great and big audience. So thank you all for having me. It's a bit special being back in my home country for that conference. Nice is a lovely city. I usually go on vacation in Nice, so it's a bit different for me to work in Nice.
Sorry to ruin it for you,
that's
but
okay.
we're here to talk business.
Look, there's a couple things. One, as you know, I've been serving the media and entertainment industry for over 20 years, or 25 years actually. And in some ways, I feel I'm part of the ecosystem, and I still share a huge passion for trying to help the ecosystem continue to transform. And I felt that the audience measurement ecosystem in particular, and Kantar Media was incredibly effective, but at the same time on the verge of quite a big transformation, right? And you guys have been talking the last couple of years. We will be talking together the last couple of years about cross-media and what does that mean and all that stuff. And we're going to talk about that today. But I felt that being part of it was really exciting. And you know, having been a consultant for quite some time, having been an operator at Sky for 5 years, I felt that was a natural step forward to do that. And then I met some of the team, and I was really fascinated by the work that they were doing. You know, the work that the Kantar Media Ibope team does in Latin America under the leadership of Antonio is amazing. The work that we do in Europe is amazing. I just wanted to be part of it and see if I can add a bit of my experience into the mix.
Great. Have a think about in the audience if you have any questions for Patrick Béhar. I've got lots, obviously, but after about 15 minutes, I'll throw it open to the floor. So what are your priorities for the first 100 days? I mean, it's quite interesting, as you've just alluded to, I'm struggling to think of someone who's made a move like this, where you've been at a major broadcaster running the commercial operation and now joining a measurement company. What are your priorities?
So first, I'm always a bit careful about the 100-day stuff. So as you can imagine, I've read a number of books of how do you start as a new CEO somewhere. And I got a lot of wanted and unwanted advice for tons of people. It's tough to decipher when it needs to be done. But
what was the worst advice you got?
All right. I had one person telling me that as a CEO, I don't know if you guys feel that, you need to think of yourself as a professional athlete, and you've got an ecosystem working around you for you. And I came out of that meeting thinking, but that's the opposite I want to do. My role is to be serving people as opposed to the opposite. So if you guys guess the name, free lunch, free dinner today.
So how do you want to do that? How are you going to serve people?
So I think it's very simple. We have a business that spans across more than 60 countries. We are doing already cross-media measurement in more than 16 countries. As you know, there's a big presence in Latin America. There's a big presence in the UK. There's amazing things going on in the Netherlands and in Nordic as well, Switzerland as well. So I think my first role is to try to meet as many of the teams and as many of our clients in my first 100 days. I don't know if it's 100, 150. Frankly, I don't have a limit around that. But I think getting to know the individuals behind the product, the relationship, the lengths, the tenure, the strengths, the weakness of the relationship, that's my priority. Now, out of that, I can always write, and any new CEO can write a set of new priorities that I share with their board and do that. But frankly, that list will only make sense after I've met many people. You know, the French, we're in France, so let me use a French expression. It comes from Auvergne, which is in the center of France, right? It's like the salt of the earth of France. And they say that you can really know someone if you share 10 kilograms of salt. That means a lot of meals, right, per WHO standards. So, it requires to meet people and spend some time with them.
And a lot of salty food, okay. I'm interested to know, given your unique background, what would the Patrick Béhar who is running Sky Media, what advice or maybe even concerns would he raise with Patrick Béhar, the CEO of Kantar Media?
Look, I've learned a few things along the way, and I think Sky Media has had an amazing performance over the last 3 to 4 years. There's a number of things that, like everyone on earth, would do differently if I were to write that story again. I think that the one thing that I'm going to try to bring to Kantar Media, and that we started discussing with the team, is an absolute obsession, and let's spend some time on this, with our client relationships. As you know, the word thinks itself as being divided between market where there's a joint industry committee and market where it's not a joint industry committee. I think about our role to be similar in both markets, which is to drive innovation and to be a bit of a provocative force, even in markets when there's a joint industry committee, and building the partnerships one step forward into that. And that's one of the things I think I've tried to do when I was at Sky. You mentioned Sky Media, but I was also blessed with running our partnerships in our distribution business. And as you guys know, for those of you who are not British, Sky comes with a bit of a reputation for not just being the 800-pound gorilla, but historically being a bit rough around the edges. And that's one of the first things my boss and the most amazing CEO and role model, Stephen Van Rooyen, told me was exercise that with prudence and with intelligence. And what I tried to do was bring a lot of partnerships into the equation. So when Sky Media developed C-Flight, the first thing I did was to try to bring ITV and Channel 4 into the tent with C-Flight, right? C-Flight was invented, thought about by our cousins at NBCU, brought it into the UK, made it a lot better, to be fair, notwithstanding how many Americans are in the room. I think C-Flight in the UK is a lot more sophisticated than C-Flight in the US.
Now it's a joint venture in the UK between ITV,
it was a joint
Sky,
venture
Channel
between the
4.
three of us.
So is that what you're saying? You're looking to bring in partners to collaborate?
Collaborate, yes. And now C-Flight is administered and managed by Béhar, which is fantastic.
And obviously, you have that relationship with Barb in the UK, talk about joint industry currencies. As you mentioned, you've got business in the Nordics, an own business in Spain, lots of assets in Latin America. So it seems to be a nice, growing business. And just recently, you've announced this deal with Foxtel, set-top boxes in Australia.
Absolutely.
So where's the growth coming from next for Kantar Media?
So look, the growth comes for every one of us in the industry. I mean, there's a holy grail, which is that cross-media audience measurement. And in my mind, behind the word is a number of things. The first thing is we talk a lot about advertising, but let's not forget that we serve, as was just said, a content industry. And for every one of our broadcasting customers, content is roughly 60 to 65% of the cost base. Right? So the data we provide, the insight we provide, the foresight we provide help make better content investment choices, decision. And in a world where content costs are exploding, and in a world where content choices are becoming incredibly complex, I can tell you that from my Sky experience, that data is even more important than the advertising data to some extent, right? Need to be careful about that. So I think that's one of the four things, which is how do I add on top of the data we're providing, we can talk about the role of the panel, the intelligence, the foresight, the insight. And as you know, we've got a fantastic company called TechEdge that does a lot of that to our clients. The second thing is obviously we're always looking at opportunities to expand our footprint in that process, cleverly, intelligently. 60 markets. We're not a huge company, right? So 60 markets. It's a lot of stretch for the resources that we have, and we're trying to be clever about it.
What about the opportunity in the US? So some time ago, you were the preferred bidder. It was reported that you were the preferred bidder for this project that the ANA wants to do in cross-media measurement. If I could be reductive, call it a Project Origin in the US sort of thing. But we haven't really heard anything since then. I mean, presumably they've not commissioned you to do a panel, to build a panel there. I mean, can you talk about what's the status of that project and what's generally your strategy in the US?
Look, we're open. We're talking to a lot of people. It's not a secret that I went to the US a couple times, meet some old friends that I know from NBCU and from all the broadcasters that were my partners. I think you're facing a very similar situation that you face in other markets, which is everyone wants to do some things and move the ball forward in terms of cross media. The question is how you do it, who do you do it with, and how do you orchestrate all that? I think there's a set of very positive forces. I mean, you've seen all the speeches that the CEO of the VAB has made recently. You've seen the speeches or the announcements that the ANA has made on the advertiser side. I think there's a lot of goodwill and willingness to take things forward. I don't think the puzzle has quite fitted yet.
So what are the challenges in the short term you need to overcome?
I think all those people need to make a decision how they want to work together. And in that role, it's very simple. We have a role of servant leadership, right? We can provide some advice, we can provide some experience, but that catalyst needs to come from inside the ecosystem in the US.
Because that project would be transformational for your business, wouldn't it? In terms of the opportunities, I can imagine that would drive up the value of Kantar Media significantly. And obviously your owners, Bain, they would be looking at that and thinking, oh, this is an opportunity to maybe look at selling the business again. I mean, there's always concerns about what's the future under this private equity company. Do you recognize that, first of all, in terms of the opportunity and what would happen next?
So actually, no. I'm going to push back on that. I spent quite a bit of time at McKinsey, and there's one sentence that has been drilled into me, which is if you do the right thing happens to you. And happened to me as well in my personal life. So if we can be helpful to the US ecosystem, if we can be helpful to the UK ecosystem, if we can be helpful to the Australian ecosystem, good things happen to the ecosystem, good things happen to Kantar, and ultimately, independently, who's the shareholder? I've been under many shareholders different, right? Consulting, private ownership, as partners, senior partners, we own the firm. I've been owned by Comcast. We're owned by Bain Capital. At the end of the day, I mean, and we can have an endless debate about this, it doesn't make any difference, right? I think shareholders try to do the right thing. They have their own constraint from a money standpoint. Trust me, getting a CapEx investment when you're at Sky from Comcast is as complex and as rigorous as it is getting a CapEx investment from Bain Cap. And I'm going through the budget process right now, so I think I know. So a lot of people in the room be thinking about the long-term ambitions of the company, and are you in it for the long haul, frankly? I mean, have you had conversations with Adam Crozier, your chairman, about, splitting up P&Ls, looking at what you can sell? You've already sold, the business sold Vivix in North America, the North American ad measurement business. So there's a couple of things. It's a good question. So as you know, Kantar Media is separating one from what I call Big Kantar, right? Which is insights and all the rest. So we have our own board. We're operating independently. So that's the one thing. Now, in terms of our destiny and my destiny, I can tell you what I told Adam Crozier, which is I came here to write a big chapter of my professional life, not a few pages. And I do love that analogy. And I think everywhere I've been, I try to write a big chapter. I don't like few pages. I find them unsatisfying.
Okay. If anyone has any questions, please do raise your hands, maybe violently. I'm going to put back on my glasses so I can see you. I want to make sure that everyone who does want to ask a question has an opportunity to do so, and we have a roving mic. But before I do, just to give you time to do that and get the microphone towards you, we touched a bit on panels talking about the US. I mean, what do you think about the future of panels as you try to capture more digital audience behavior? The mix of weighting of panels versus first-party data, return path data. How are you tapping into that? Can you provide information for the audience about how you see that evolving?
Well, I think I'm opening an open door, and remember, I've been there 8 weeks, so it gives me the right to make a few mistakes. Please be indulgent. But one of the things I've observed is I think the role of panel becomes even more important, but slightly different. from just measuring what's going on in terms of audience, both on the content and the advertising side, into calibrating big set of data, because there's going to be multiplication of big data sets, right? Whether coming from digital platforms, coming from the digital side of the traditional broadcasters, coming from new players in social media as well. And then the question is, in front of that big data sets, how do you cross-calibrate them, correct the biases, add some value, compare them, have the ability to dedupe reach and frequency, contrast, and therefore, panel remains incredibly important, but the layer of data intelligence and data science on top of it becomes even more important to be able to have an integrated view, which I think is the holy grail we're all trying to bring to our customers, whether it's advertisers, broadcasters, agencies as well.
Okay. Does anyone have a question for Patrick Béhar? You must, a lot of you use TGI in the room. Have some questions about that at the very least? Yes, please.
Guess what, it's me. Morning, Patrick.
Morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm very well. In a world where for the last 30 years we've had linear panels and we all transmit the same things, and would you believe in each country we all have a slightly definition of what a view is. And now we're in a new world where we could set standards so that we know what the definition of an impression is and we know what a 30-second view is. To what extent can Kantar, Nielsen and GfK help broadcasters set those standards as opposed to each country saying, we want it done this way?
So, standard, yes. Standardization, probably not. I mean, you know me pretty well, right? For those of you in the audience, Jeff is part of the Sky Media team, so we've been working together for 5 years. One of the things I firmly believe in is putting back the tool and the flexibility of the tool in the hand of the advertisers, in the hand of the agencies, and in the hand of the people that use it, as opposed to constraining the tool by maximum amount of standards around that. I think we can have a philosophical debate about that, but if we look even outside of our industry, every time someone in the industry has given the flexibility of the tool back into the people that ultimately use them, and by the way, ultimately pay for them, we end up in a good situation.
I just mentioned TGI right now. I have a question about TGI. I mean, you've been the preferred market supplier in the UK at least for a long time, but now you face kind of increasing more competition from like GWI, YouGov. What's your plan for keeping these competitors at bay?
Look, as you know, TGI is part of the DNA of Kantar Media. We had a lot of emotional attachment to this business. We welcome the arrival of new competitors and different way of doing things. I think it's going to challenge us, and I think it's going to force us to look back and think about how do we change and adapt our operating model, for sure. We're going to need to adapt our cost base. That's some of the early findings that I'm seeing, but I think we can do that in a clever way. We're probably going to need to focus TGI on a few things that TGI does really well in the UK, in Nordic, there's some other markets as well. Frankly, I welcome the competition. I think it's going to foster innovation in the industry.
And what about panels generally? Do they need to be bigger, frankly? Do panels just need to be bigger in terms of to capture more audience fragmentation? In the UK, we have, Barb does monthly 100 shows, and it's something like 4 or 5 of the streaming shows make it in there. Do you think that data is actually being captured as well as it can? How do you improve on that?
So first, as you know, Barb, under the leadership of Justin, is moving its panel size from 5,000 to 7,000, as you guys know, which is a great thing. As a trend statistician, as you guys know, and you guys know that much better than me, is there's a limit to the value you have by just multiplying the size of the panel, right? If you think that the role of the panel more and more is around cross-calibration of big data sets and not just viewing, then you're probably okay with that type of size, right? You may want to add a few to capture some specifics or recalibrate constantly for the younger demos or other type of behavior. But you're not going to get massive value from moving from 7,000 to 700,000 to do that. And I can tell you, and my friend Jeff could say that, Sky has its own panel with a few 100,000 and even several million that Sky uses for different things. At the end of the day, you don't use that many people to do that, statistically, for what you want to do.
Okay, Patrick Béhar, Kantar Media, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. Thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you.